We'll start with an application that allows working with information about customers and materials. By entering a customer and an organization using these default values, which can be modified by the user, we will add the possibility to do the following. View all its sales orders, which is to say, work with sales orders, and then select one of them to view its details. The information of the order header and its lines, only one here, because the order is made for a single material. If there were more, they would be displayed below. The implementation of these screens is similar to what we've already seen for materials and customers. We won't go into detail here. Here's the Work With element with a grid whose default action is the View Order event, which invokes the View panel where the information of the selected sales order is displayed in two tabs. The attached XPZ file, salesorders.xpz, can be imported to incorporate these objects into your knowledge base without having to deploy them from scratch. Your KB must have the procedure SAP Session Manager Connect that makes the connection to the SAP ERP. Otherwise, the import will fail. The SAP Session Manager Connect.xpz file contains this procedure, but the connection data is empty. Therefore, you need to enter your data. To import all the objects developed so far in an empty KB, locate the file kbstate precreate salesorder.xpz. You'll have to open the procedure SAP Session Manager Connect and enter the connection data to your SAP ERP. Otherwise, the execution will fail because they're empty. Note that now from the input menu, we don't call the Work With element. Instead, we call the intermediate panel Ask Sales Orders Filters. In its layout, it has two no-read-only variables, which is to say, the user can enter values for them. Also, we can see that they have been started in the Start event. Meanwhile, in the event associated with the button, the Sales Orders Work With element is invoked, sending these two variables and parameters so that the Work With can filter by their values. Of course, to show the sales orders of the customer and organization received in a parameter, in the invoked procedure, we had to call the getList method of the sales order BAPI previously imported from the SAP ERP through the connector. Here, we can see the external object and the data types imported into GeneXus. In the SAP Sales Order external object, we've imported two methods. The first one will be used to create a new sales order. The second one, getList, has been used to obtain the sales orders displayed in the Work With screen, and also to obtain the sales order displayed in the detail screen when it is selected from the list. This is what we've developed so far. Next, we will add a button to the Work With application bar to allow entering a new sales order from there. To do so, we will complete the header's details, which are started by default but can be changed. And then we indicate the quantities and materials ordered. In this case, there's only one. Upon saving, the sales order is entered into the system. To implement all this with GeneXus, in the Work With screen, we right-click on the application bar, Insert button, which prompts us for the name of the event it'll be associated with. It'll be called Insert. In this event, we will program the invocation to the panel we saw at runtime, where the user will enter the sales order details so that it's inserted in the ERP database after saving it. This panel has to be created. The user will need to be able to enter the order header from this screen, as well as the lines with the quantity of each material ordered. Therefore, we insert a tab control to separate both. The header details will be called Order, and the line details will be called Lines. We will delete the third tab, which will not be necessary. Note that to implement the Work With and View screens, we'd already defined two types of structured data: Sales Order Header to represent the header, We use it in the Work With screen and in the View Orders tab. And then Sales Order Item to store each order line, which we used as a collection in the View Details tab. So, we will define a variable of Sales Order Header data type. We insert it in the screen for the user to be able to enter the header field. And for the lines, we will have it enter only the material of each one. Character 18. Also the ordered quantity, numeric 13, of which 3 of them are decimals. We need a variable that stores all the lines the user enters on the screen. To do so, we define a variable called Sales Order Item of Sales Order Item type, and it is a collection. We insert it in the layout, choosing to show only the material and quantity. When the user enters the material and quantity in these variables, a new item has to be entered in this collection. To do so, we create a button associated with an add event, in whose code a procedure will have to be invoked. It'll be called addLine and will receive the 2 variables loaded by the user as input parameters, material and quantity. As input-output parameter, it'll receive the collection of lines that we have so far. It's empty at the beginning, so that it returns the same collection, but with a new line including the variable values. It's already created here. We can see its parameter declaration in its parm rule, and in the source, we can see that everything it does is add an item with the values of the variables received in the collection, which was also received. For now, the add method of a collection can't be specified within an event that is run on the device. For this reason, we had to do it through this procedure instead of doing it here. This would have been different if the event implementing the add method belonged to the server, such as a start, refresh, or load. Note that the appearance of the Lines tab has been improved. Once the user has given a value to the header variables and entered the lines, a button must be provided to create the sales order with this data. To do so, we insert a button in the application bar, whose associated event will be called Save. It'll invoke a procedure that will connect with SAP ERP to create a new sales order with the information entered by the user on the screen. And we will call it SAP Sales Order Create. And we use input parameters to send it the 2 collection variables containing the header and line data. That is to say, Sales Order Header and Sales Order Items. And it will return a variable with the identifier of the entered order, Sales Document. The BAPI shows that it must be character 10. As usual, there will be another one called Messages, with the possible warning or error messages. Since it's an event executed on the client, that is to say, on the device and not on the server, such as refresh, they will be automatically handled. As a result, it will not be necessary to run through this collection to show them on the screen. To save, we must create the procedure. We define the variables that will be declared as parameters. And we place them in the parm rule. First, we must connect to the ERP as usual. Then, we define a variable called SAP Session Manager of external object type GX Enterprise Session Manager, and we invoke the procedure that makes the connection. If there was no connection error, the sales order has to be created. To do so, we will use the createFromDat2 method of the external object that implements the RFC communication with the BAPI. All these parameters have to be sent. Of these, orderHeaderIn is used to enter the header details. We will only enter those that have been shown to the user. OrderItemsIn of collection type is used to enter the information of each line. For each line, we only enter material and target quantity. OrderSchedulesIn is used to schedule the delivery dates for each material. Only the ordered quantity will be recorded. OrderPartners, also of collection type, will be used in this case with a single item to register the customer. We start by dragging the data types used by the method to create variables. The type BAPI-RET2 was already used by materials, and we change their name so that they match the name of each parameter for the sake of simplicity, marking those that are collections. All the variables have been defined, including the simple types. The 4 variables that we mentioned have to be loaded. Since OrderItemsIn is a collection, we need a variable of each item type. The same happens with OrderSchedulesIn and with OrderPartners. Here, we've already included the code that loads these variables. OrderHeaderIn, with the information extracted from some elements of the structured variable SalesOrderHeader received in a parameter, and that the user completed in the screen. The items of the OrderItemsIn collection are taken from each item of the SalesOrderItems collection that was also received in a parameter and entered by the user on the screen. The same applies to the OrderSchedules collection. Lastly, a single partner is added to the OrderPartners collection, with the customer's details taken from SalesOrderHeader. Now that all the input variables have been entered, we're ready to invoke the createFromDat2 method of the BAPI. And we enter all the parameters in order. Unlike the methods that we've used so far, this method saves in the ERP database. That's why we need to indicate that it creates a logical work unit, which means that the operations performed since before it started until it's completed must be all performed, or none of them must be performed. In the database jargon, this is called a transaction. So, we must define the beginning and the end of this database transaction, or logical work unit. To do so, the object GX Enterprise Session Manager has the methods TransactionBegin and TransactionCommit, meaning that they're used before and after invoking the method createFromDat2 through the session variable. Now we only have to load the messages collection with the messages and return the sales order identifier generated in the ERP. Messages are located in the return parameter returned by the BAPI. Note that it's an item collection of BAPI-RET2 type. Item number 311 will contain the identifier of the generated sales order in the field Message V2, which is why we type this code. Now we only have to record the abort or error messages in addition to 311. We define the variables message item and return item and then we save. We return to the panel that prompts the user for the sales order details. We add initial data for the variables of the Order tab in the header so that the user doesn't have to enter them again. To do so, in the start event that is run on the server when the panel is opened, only the first time, to the variable Sales Order Header, we will assign the result of running a data provider object. What this does is return the loaded structured data type. We will call it Sales Order Header Init. We drag the sales order header structured data type that will be returned and loaded by the data provider. And then we simply give a value to the elements we want to start. Here is the output. Once the procedure to create the sales order has been invoked, we will have to call the panel that displays the order. To do so, when we try to save, we're asked to enter the composite command that is required in the events that are run on the client and are made up of 2 or more invocations, as in this case. We specify and save. And now we can test what we've developed. We only have to invoke the panel created from the sales orders work with. And we press F5. We select customer and organization and view all their sales orders. We add a new one, and we leave the values offered by default, changing only the date. We select the material M1000, the autocomplete feature is enabled, quantity 5, and add it as an order line. We save. The View panel is open to show the details of the order just entered. It was given this number. If we try to return by pressing back, it takes us to the Create screen, which we're not interested in. We want to return to the Work With screen that first invoked it. To do so, we just need to type In this way, the called view is placed in the invocation stack where the current object was located, replacing it with the Create panel. As a result, pressing back on the View screen will not return to Create, but to the panel that called it. This can be seen at runtime. This is the end of our demo. To see this application with more design elements, and a login screen that allows connecting to various ERPs, by changing the connection data and entering a valid username and password, please visit our knowledge base server and log in with your GX Technical user account. If you don't have one, create one and select the knowledge base shown below. Here you can see some aspects of the KB. To examine it in detail and try it out, Open GeneXus and create a KB based on the one from the KB server we just saw. Enter the server URL and your username and password. You can test this connection if you want. After that, all the KBs in that server will be shown. Pick one and create a local KB connected to that of the server and started with all its objects. This KB also has a web development. For more information about the development of applications connected to SAP ERP with GeneXus, including web applications, we recommend visiting our wiki. Thank you for joining us.